Hey, good morning. Some of what I'm going to be doing today is retracing some old steps of mine. For example, this Tad Steaks behind me. I ate there 36 years ago. Used to come here on the regular when I was a resident here in San Francisco. And I couldn't find it because it's right off of the main street. And I couldn't remember which turn to make. So I finally rediscovered it. So what I hope to also show is my old house, stuff like that. This is going to be an adventure for me, personal, just to kind of figure out what it is that I used to do and where I used to go. Because some of the memories have slipped away and the town has changed as well. So this should be fun. So another thing that I'm sort of figuring out as I bump along the streets of San Francisco is, so when I used to live at 737 Hyde Street, that was on the edge of what was known as the Tenderloin, which is also the edge of the neighborhood that we are now. So this is definitely the tourist district down here where the cable cars are. And then, you know, as you go uphill, you have the roughest part of the city, the Tenderloin, which was the red light district back in the day and is now still a bad neighborhood, but not dangerous. It's just where most of the transient people live. And so I hope to do some investigation. Daylight and the morning is probably the best time of the day to go exploring in neighborhoods that are less than savory. And my house is on the other end of that neighborhood, so it's probably going to be an interesting journey. I think I realized when I lived here, I was a denizen of the Tenderloin as much as I didn't want to admit it. I was a transient. So here goes nothing. We're going to go exploring into some of the residential parts of the city and see if I can remember what it was like living here 37 years ago and sort of rekindle some old memories. All right, I'm retracing my steps as a resident of San Francisco 36 or 37 years ago. And this hotel here, the St. Moritz, which is on O'Farrell Street, right by Union Square, it's one of the places I landed during my journey. It was the first place I lived independently in San Francisco. I'd been couch surfing up until then, and then this was a spot. A couple of weeks. I'll tell you the story of why they haven't electrified this Geary line and still use these old diesel-powered accordion buses. But this is the exact route that I used to take home from work when I used to live here 36 years ago. And so now I'm standing at the bus stop that I used to get off after work. All right, 737 Hyde Street, my first honest-to-goodness residence here in San Francisco back in the fall of 1986, 85. That door behind you is the cellar or basement door leading to where my apartment was. I lived in the basement of this building, and this is the exit. You can't get in through this door, but there was no reason for me to climb a staircase in order to get out. So yeah, it is actually still a fairly nice apartment building. I liked living here. So, as mentioned, 737 Hyde was the first place I lived in San Francisco. It was a studio apartment, as all the places that I lived were. And we're in what was euphemistically called the Lower Nob Hill. Geary Boulevard, where I just left, is actually the official boundary between the Tenderloin and the Nob Hill neighborhood. And this is 1.5 blocks above Geary. So just on the other side of the boundary between the nice neighborhood and the rough one. But it's a beautiful spot. Sits on the side of the hill. and surrounded by other post-World War I era several story high apartment buildings built with elevators. So that was a novel thing back then. Yeah, that was one of the reasons how I ended up in San Francisco as a resident. Was I had a car that was broken into or right outside this building one evening, and so I had to sell the car, and here I was, a resident of San Francisco, and taking bus transit and other rapid transit systems everywhere I went. All right, 737 Hyde in the background there, and as promised, here's a little story about the diesel Geary line. So never electrified apparently, even back then. So the G line was supposed to be either the Muni or BART system transit up into Marin County across the Golden Gate Bridge. Marin County refused to allow that. Apparently still have. So the G, standing for either Geary or Golden Gate, to this day remains a temporary diesel bus line for the last 40 years up to the Presidio, which is the entrance to the Golden Gate. Someday, maybe, the Marin will relent and allow transit buses other than their own Golden Gate Transit with very specific terminals here in San Francisco up into Marin County. But so far, they have not allowed BART or Muni to use the G line, the Geary line, the Golden Gate line, access into any county north of the Golden Gate. So that double fold diesel bus line is still the transit up and down Geary. Crazy. All right, so we're on Sutter Street, right around the corner from Hyde, heading west. Behind me is the Raphael House, and back in the day when I used to live in this neighborhood, Raphael House, in addition to being a mission house with priests and nuns, they also used to serve breakfast. It was delicious, it was cheap, and their garden where they grew herbs and such used to back up to my window over on 737 Hyde. There's a courtyard behind this building and mine. And so I used to have a bay leaf tree that I used to be able to pick bay leaves off, which was a especially tasty treat to add to what little I could afford to purchase and eat in that little apartment. Interestingly enough, my apartment, Unit B, no longer exists. It was apparently an illegal apartment even when I lived there. That was added by renovators. And so Unit A next door is now the manager's apartment. So obviously I can't get into my old residence, but fond memories, good times. I used to love it. I really did. All right, you can't see inside, but I took a look. This is the old Tappy's Sutter Street Bar and Grill. And this, I spent many an evening here. I could get into this bar without crossing a street from my house. Interestingly enough, this was my watering hole, and yet both the owner and the bartender were sober. And so, in a way, this was my introduction to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, because these people told me their story, and I wasn't ready to hear it, but I remember it. And I remember the night that the bartender served us drinks on the house and said, "This one's for me, because I don't drink anymore. I have 8 years." And so, another good memory. All right, here's Polk Street, right down the street from 737 Hyde. This was the commercial strip where I could go hang out when I wasn't working. Behind me is the taqueria that introduced me to California burritos. The thing was $6, and it was as big as a football. And I would come down here and just chow down on those suckers. Amazing that it's still a taqueria. The Chinese place is still a Chinese place. This neighborhood has not really changed all that much. All right, I'm walking down what's known as Polk Street Gulch, and we are back in the Tenderloin as we are south of Geary. This neighborhood is just as sketchy as I remember it. The honest truth is, I have to keep my street smarts around me as I do now. A little nervous about talking into the camera because I'm just showing off a big camera. But if it gets too sketchy, I'll simply hike on up to Van Ness, which is one of the main boulevards. But I wanted to show you something before I did. So here we go. Okay, here we are on the corner of Polk and O'Farrell, and what I wanted to show you was the O'Farrell Theater, which was a X-rated movie theater literally since the 1950s. Very famous spot. Hunter S. Thompson used to hang out there. Beyond it, the Great American Music Hall, which was also a place for great musical acts. So the Great American Music Hall is one of those places where I saw some amazing acts, including Hot Tuna, a couple other people, and the Grateful Dead performed their famous One from the Vault musical performance of the Blues for Allah album live for the first time there back in 1976, long before I actually was around here. But this was, in fact, one of those amazing places. As sketchy as this neighborhood is, this was a great place to see some music. I did not go into the O'Farrell Theater. That was not my bag and still isn't to this day. All right, continuing to walk down Polk Street, and honestly, we are now in the heart of the Tenderloin. I think it is a wise maneuver on my part to walk up a block to Van Ness, where the street walking in a literal sense is not scary, but this is the heart of the Tenderloin. There, I can smell it. Tenderloin has a very distinct smell, and so I am going to move to safer territory, to be honest. Okay, we're on Van Ness, which is a major north-south artery for San Francisco. This is also, I believe, state route or U.S. Route 101. So you can see a Jaguar dealership behind me. This is commercial territory. And now when people are walking past me and they're talking to themselves, they're actually on their phone and not just talking to themselves. So I'm going to walk down this way. A little better. So here it is, Max's, the firm I used to work for. I actually worked not for Max Berkowitz, but his son. And this is the only surviving Max's in San Francisco. I worked at Max's Diner down by the Moscone Center on the corner of 3rd and Folsom. And I know it doesn't exist anymore. It was closed up years ago. But it's good to see that Sam Berkowitz still has things going. All right, here I am. This is San Francisco City Hall. And also behind me, the State of California building. This is the Civic Center. This is the center of town, corner of Van Ness and McAllister. And yeah, this is my neighborhood during 1986 and 87. Lived here for over a year. All right, so this plaza was one of those spots that I always had the option of walking through on my way to and from work, if I was so inclined. And and it's just a beautiful spot right here in the Civic Center. Now, I actually lived just beyond this in what's called the Hayes Valley, and I'll tell you why the two neighborhoods are joined now in just another minute. Okay, so back when I lived in this neighborhood, Civic Center / Hayes Valley, back in '87, there was a elevated freeway, the 101 freeway, which ran over the streets of San Francisco. Huge blight and eyesore, been built during the 60s during a period of expansion. It fell down during the Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989. And when that happened, they simply rebuilt the city minus the elevated freeway. So you can see the older buildings here, that modern building there. Also true here, there's a modern building. And then over here, this old hotel was standing. So when I would walk in and out of my neighborhood, I would have to go underneath this freeway, which was always a little bit of a dicey proposition. I had to keep your eyes and ears open when that happened. So now that the freeway is gone, the neighborhoods are joined together, and it is much, much nicer. So when the 101 freeway that used to be in this neighborhood fell down during the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, what replaced it was this beautiful park, which now runs the length of Octavia, where the freeway used to be, and then the 101 doesn't start till after Van Ness, which totally changes the character of this neighborhood, from borderline to beautiful. All right, so here it is, my old stomping ground. This is 501 Grove Street, apartment number 1, directly behind me. And I lived there for over a year while I was here in San Francisco. It's a great little neighborhood. Like I said, a little nicer than it used to be, but nonetheless, it was a quiet, pleasant, and friendly neighborhood to live in. It has that very typical San Francisco look to it. So I was perfectly at home hanging out here, and it is really cool to come back here after all this time, all these years, and see it again. Once again, 501 Grove Street, apartment number 1, my home for over a year here in San Francisco. It's a cool little neighborhood here in the Hayes Valley. It does not look all that much changed at all. It still has pretty much the same vibe as when I lived here, including this little market, which is also right here, just like it used to be. So great to have old memories and visit old places. All right, this concludes the big round trip to my former places of residence here in San Francisco. I'm back at the hotel. I'm going to take a short break. Next thing to tackle is a trip to the Pacific Ocean and the Golden Gate. So follow along.